right now on the Georgia vote. It's on to November. After voters decided several runoff races, we're hearing from the winners. Also,
Quavo and the Vice President of the United States of America.
The Biden administration keeping the Peach State in its sights. 2 high-profile visits to Metro Atlanta this week, keeping the issues of gun violence and fentanyl trafficking front and center. Plus,
as somebody who's grown up in this community for 40 years, not enough has been done.
Gerald Griggs, president of Georgia's NAACP, shares how both major candidates for the White House can make inroads with Georgia's black men. All right now on the Georgia Vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to the Georgia Vote. Zach is off this Sunday, and we start with this. For a second straight show, we open with a visit to Atlanta by the nation's vice president. Kamala Harris arrived on Tuesday, 4 days after her last visit to Atlanta. This time, it was to take part in a summit on gun violence at the Carter Center. Harris shared the stage with Grammy-nominated rapper Quavo on what would have been the birthday of his nephew, fellow Migos rapper Takeoff. Now, part of the vice president's message was to reiterate her stance on the Second Amendment.
Too many people who I will call cowards have been pushing this false choice to suggest you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. That's a false choice. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I also believe there is no reason why we have assault weapons on the streets of America. They are weapons of war.
Meanwhile, the nation's Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was also in Atlanta this week. She announced new efforts to fight the opioid crisis while also placing sanctions against members of a Mexican cartel known for trafficking fentanyl, cocaine, and meth into the U.S. Yellen says the Treasury Department is teaming up with the IRS and private banks in the crackdown against drug trafficking operations worldwide.
They rely on access to banking systems and to the U.S. dollar to make payroll and finance purchases. And this means the Treasury Department has a unique ability to disrupt and degrade their operations.
Yellen also pointed out that the opioid epidemic has taken more than 1 million lives since 2000 and fears hundreds of thousands more could die of overdoses by the end of the decade. Well, this Thursday, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, they will meet for their very first debate of this election cycle. They will face off at CNN studios right here in Atlanta, and we now know the ground rules for this debate. This debate will last for 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. Microphones will be muted except for the candidate whose turn it is to talk. No written notes will be allowed. Candidates, they'll only get a pen and paper. They'll also not be able to interact with their campaign staff during these breaks. And President Biden, he actually won the coin toss to pick his preferred lectern. His team, they chose the one on the right. While former President Trump, he will get the final closing statement. Well, locally, several other candidates, they advanced to November's ballot after scoring big wins in this past Tuesday's runoff election. A closely watched race in the 3rd Congressional District. Former Donald Trump White House advisor Brian Jack beating former State Senate Majority Leader Mike Dugan. Jack tells 11 Alive that the former president's backing was crucial.
When I first got into the race, I was polling at 1%. With his endorsement and the campaign that we ran, educating people about my relationship with him, my embracement of his policies, his endorsement lifted me to 47% in the first round. And in the second round, as you saw tonight, over 60%.
Now, the Democratic primary for DeKalb County CEO went to a runoff. Lorraine Cochran Johnson outpacing former County Commissioner Larry Johnson. And with no Republicans running in the primary, she is in line to be the very first black woman to ever hold this position.
Endorsements don't win races. Money is important, but it does not decide races. So I want people to know that if you work hard, if you connect with people, if you're sincere, and if you have a heart for people, they will understand.
And in the Democratic primary runoff for Clayton County Sheriff, LaVon Allen, the incumbent here, a 10-point winner over Jeffrey Turner. Allen says that he's just glad to have his battles at the polls behind him.
Now that there's no political reasoning for denying my request for the jail so that someone else can make it seem like they're better off, now that that's out of the way, we can really get to the business of getting things fixed.
Well, this past week, we saw the celebration of Juneteenth, a day marking the end of slavery here in the U.S., with understanding of the generations-long struggle for equality in our nation. Well, here in Atlanta, the signs of division, they are still with us today. 11 Alive's Naima Abdullahi examines one popular stretch of road here in Atlanta where the past intersects with the present.
In Atlanta, historically, roadways have been used to segregate communities as a way to slow down integration. Here are 3 historic examples. Number 1, the Ashley Ordinance, a racial zoning ordinance that tried to legally restrict where Black people could live in Atlanta. Number 2, a wooden roadblock built in the Cascade Heights neighborhood referred to Atlanta's Berlin Wall. And number 3, I-20, the biggest historic barrier between Black and white neighborhoods. For this report, we dug into one example. Let's take you to one of those dividing lines, Ponce de Leon Avenue. A 16-mile-long road that cuts through an ever-changing Atlanta.
We have a lot of history here in Atlanta.
The culture,
welcome to Atlanta where the play is played.
A magnet that brings people in.
A lot of people come here to make their dreams come true.
But the history, a reminder of racial tensions and division. When cross streets intersect with Ponce, it changes names. Boulevard becomes Monroe Drive, and Moreland Avenue becomes Briarcliff. Historians say this was a strategy so people didn't have to share the same address.
When we understand a city such as Atlanta, historically, white means north, south means black.
Dr. Maurice Hobson, historian and Georgia State professor, breaks down the resistance against integration.
White America did not want to be seen as living on the same street as Black Americans, and it feeds into the American capitalist idea of property value.
Miss Pamela has lived along Ponce de Leon Avenue for about 8 years and sees the division.
Even MARTA separates the north from the south and the east and the west.
For example, here are 2 neighborhoods. North of Ponce is Virginia Highland, where almost 80% of residents are white and the median household income is around $112,000. And south of Ponce is Old Fourth Ward, which is now experiencing a huge demographic shift due to gentrification. Back in 2000, the neighborhood was 76% Black with a median household income of less than $20,000. Rapid gentrification has blurred the lines along Ponce.
Because as you can see right up the street here, they just got rid of some of the housing projects.
In an ever-changing Atlanta, Dr. Hobson says how the city moves forward always depends on what's prioritized.
People should be put first. People should be put over policies. People should be put over profits.
Naima Abdullahi, 11 Alive News.
The city of Atlanta has proposed the fiscal year budget for 2025, which includes a $17 million investment in affordable housing to address these concerns. Well, coming up here after the break, Georgia's NAACP President Gerald Griggs on how the presidential campaigns are connecting with one group of Georgia voters who could decide the winner of the White House. And later, we head to Cobb County and find out what a firearms instructor says is important this election year. A big part of Joe Biden's win over Donald Trump in the 2020 race came from the number of Black voters in Georgia increasing by about 130,000 from the 2016 election. Well, this week we spoke with NAACP President Gerald Griggs about what it'll take for either candidate to win the state's highly coveted 16 electoral votes in November. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they are coming hard after the Black vote, specifically Black men. Several of them, both of them have been to Atlanta several times. Vice President Kamala Harris in Atlanta this week. When we saw President Joe Biden give his commencement speech at Morehouse, it was a plea to not just Black voters, but those Black men that were graduating there. Some people wrote it off as just Biden saying what he needs to say to get the Black vote. Some people citing the '94 crime bill, saying that Biden doesn't care about Black people. Do you think that that's true? Do you think that the Biden administration has done enough for black voters, especially black men?
I think neither candidate has done enough for black voters, specifically black men. There's a lot of rhetoric around who's the best president for black America, what people have done for black America. Let's be clear, not enough has been done. Not enough has been done to protect the vote. Not enough has been done to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which was the reason why we had the largest political and largest social protest in the history of this country in 2020. Not enough has been done to pour economic investment into the African American community. So I appreciate what the president and the former president are touting they've done for the African American community. But myself, as an African American man, as somebody who's grown up in this community for 40 years, not enough has been done. And so when we talk about the infrastructure bill, when we talk about investment in HBCUs, when we talk about protecting the vote, we need to actually see those things in real time. And so to both candidates who will come to Atlanta and speak directly to the citizens of Atlanta. Don't come for photo ops. Don't come for events at certain social gathering places. Come directly into Bankhead. Come directly into the South Side. Go down to Macon. Go to Savannah. Go to Augusta. Talk to the black vote, because whoever wins the black vote in Georgia will be the president of the United States, and we have a lot to say.
I want to ask you about former President Donald Trump. Recently, his campaign announced the Black Americans for Trump coalition in that email. And it's something that the former president has repeatedly said, that he has done more for the black community than any other president in recent history. There was a Wall Street Journal poll that came out. It polled black men in swing states. That poll showed that 30% of black men said that they would either definitely or they are thinking about voting for President Trump. It also cited a 2020 poll that showed 12% of black men voted for the former president. Can former President Trump deliver for black men in America?
That's a good question, and I trust the poll the NAACP did. And the poll the NAACP did said that 10% approved of President Trump's presidency, 10% of black people. And so I hear a lot of the rhetoric, I listen to the polls, but then I go into the community. Right now, the person that's running the best campaign in the black community is the couch. And we have to figure out how we get people more engaged by getting the candidates to talk about actual deliverables instead of rhetoric. Let's be clear. Donald Trump did not do enough for the African-American community for him to say he's the greatest president for the African-American community. The greatest president for the African-American community would probably be Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, of course, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then Lyndon Baines Johnson, just to start. And then, of course, you have President Barack Obama. During President Trump's administration, we had African-Americans being called SOBs. We had all kinds of police violence going forth while he was clearing people out to take a photo op. We had people telling us to inject bleach and UV rays under the skin while we saw a pandemic of both COVID-19 and racism 1619. And then we saw in a neighborhood in Scintilla Shores 2 flags that were flying when Ahmaud Arbery was brutally lynched. One was a Confederate flag, and the other was the flag of a certain political candidate. And then we had somebody call into Georgia and say that black people didn't vote and they needed to find 11,000 votes. So respectfully, I push back on whether or not he's the greatest president for black people. He still has the opportunity. Of course, as the NAACP, we're nonpartisan, so we're going to hold anybody accountable. If he wants to talk about real deliverables and not tennis shoes, we're willing to listen. But until he does that in a forum that's not controlled, like the black church in Detroit that he went to, which was not filled with African Americans, come down to a black church down here and let's have a real conversation about what you can do for black people.
All right, coming up after the break, Fal Sabak and Deanna Harris join us to bring context on this past week's headlines in our roundtable. You're watching The Georgia Vote. Welcome back. Time now for our political roundtable. Today we have Republican strategist Deanna Harris. Right now she is serving as managing partner at Midnight Rider Consulting with former state senator Jeff Mullis. And Fal Sabak, Assistant Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting, and former Executive Director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus. Ladies, thank you so much for being here on the panel this Sunday morning. I want to start with reaction from our newsmaker, Mr. Griggs. And Deanna, I want to start with you by asking that poll that was referenced there from the Wall Street Journal, 30% of black men polled in swing states, and how they're feeling about the Trump campaign. If you're working with Mr. Trump's campaign, what is your next move to hone in on these voters?
So for the first time, I would actually agree with Gerald Griggs. He was right. The former president needs to come into the city of Atlanta. He needs to come into our more urban areas and inside just really Georgia, where black voters are. So Macon, Savannah, Augusta, and visit those voters and get to know what their needs are. Economic development's a huge issue for the black community. So I think that's a good starting point.
And Val, I want to flip the script here. If you're working with the Biden campaign, you see the same poll come out. What's your next move?
I think I would continue to do what the Biden administration has been doing, which is come in. I know President Biden came and addressed Morehouse College, gave the commencement speech. I would continue to engage that community and get back out into Atlanta, other cities around the state, and just continue and engage them and talk about the issues that matter to them.
I want to ask you guys about the upcoming presidential debate. A lot of people are waiting for next week when we see these two go head-to-head for the first time since 2020. Yeah. And either of you can take this. What are you looking for this week for this debate?
So, I mean, I'm looking to see what topics that they talk about. What are the top issues that they've been hearing about on the campaign trail? What is their platform going to be? And then what resonates with folks?
I would really like to see former President Trump to hold Joe Biden's feet to the fire. We really want to, ask him about the issues, what has his administration done, and even question his stability right now as president with such the issues that we see on TV.
Do you think, Deanna, I'll ask you this, are there any weak spots that Trump could really come in on to Mr. Biden?
Well, ask me, yes, there are many. But for the most part, I think some of the issues is our current state of our economy, of course, immigration, right? Some of those big federal issues that we see what the Biden administration says that they're doing, but not reality in different individuals in the everyday person's purse or pocket.
Who do you guys think has more to win or more to lose here?
I think both of them have the same either win or lose. I mean, I think President Trump, if he focuses on the past in the 2020 election, I think that's going to be problematic for him. I think President Biden really needs to lean into his accomplishments from his current term and champion what he's been fighting for.
Deanna?
Well, I think that the best idea for President Trump is to not attack President Biden, but more so stand on what he looks to do to make things better for us and talk about the issues. And again, not to go back onto what our election was in 2020 and just move forward from that. I think people are done with those issues and they're really focused on what's happening today.
And real quick here, do you guys think, this is a really early debate, right? Usually we don't see these debates until after the conventions. Right. Is that going to have any weight here? How early it is?
I think it'll help prime the stage for, as we know, campaign season never stops now. So I think having an idea of where the candidates stand and then what their plan is to engage voters as we get closer to November, I think that's what will be very important.
Yeah. Well, my fear is that if Joe Biden totally bombs it, then maybe at their convention they could possibly nominate someone else that could be a real threat. We don't know.
And Val, just really quick here, we saw VP Harris, Secretary of Treasury Yellen come to Atlanta. They've been coming a lot. Does this mean anything from the campaign?
Oh, absolutely. The road to the White House goes through Georgia. They saw that in 2020 where, pundits had typically written us off to say, oh, nobody's going to win Georgia. The fact that they won Georgia and they can do it again. They just have to invest time and resources and energy, and they'll be able to win the state.
Well, may the best man win. We will certainly see. Thank you both so much for being here on panel. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Well, when we come back, we will talk with a Cobb County firearms instructor about the issues which may have an impact on his ballot later this year. Time now for this week's Voice of the Voter, where we go to where you are to hear in your own words what matters to you most. Today, we are off to Powder Springs to hear from Oliver Price, co-owner and instructor at South Atlanta Firearms.
Are you seeing an increase in firearm ownership here in Georgia?
I am. I'm seeing, to believe it or not, women.
Why do you think that is? Why do they say it is?
They're looking for home protection. They're by themselves. They're raising their children. It's as simple as that. And they want something to protect themselves with. Access to firearms is a good thing if you have the training.
So you think in Georgia, before you go out and purchase a firearm,
you should go to training, number one.
Almost like if you're going to drive a car first, you got to go through driver's school and get your license.
There you go. That is correct. Right? So why isn't it the same when it comes to firearms?
We've got a big election in November.
Yes.
Looking ahead, what worries you the most?
Your average person living in Georgia, living in New York, living in California, some other place, Wyoming, their concern is, am I able to afford putting food on the table? Am I able to get up, go work, make an honest living, come home and pay the bills? The next one is social. What do our candidates feel about Second Amendment rights? What do they feel about our small communities, our communities that are LGBTQ plus communities?
What do you wish people knew about you and your life and your work that you think maybe a lot of folks don't know?
Let me answer that in 1 second, but I want to give you one more thought that
Please.
just came to mind. While President Trump was in office, my business was booming because I think America was in chaos. And they thought that they all needed weapons. They thought they needed to protect themselves from whatever entity they thought. And they went out and they bought a lot of guns and they got a lot of training.
That's good for a business like yours.
It is good for a business like mine. Great. But is that the way I wanted the direction of the country to go? As a business owner, do I want the prior president to go back into office so my business can blossom because people are going to go crazy and they're going to want guns and they want more firearms training, and sure, I want to go to range and protect myself and all that good stuff? That's for business. But as a person living in America, I still want that safety and that understanding that the president's doing the right thing. And it won't be World War III or something going on. I don't know.
How do you make that decision?
I'm still making a decision.
We always end on this. What are you optimistic about?
Technology. I think we're evolving with it. I really do.
Our thanks to Zach Merchant for that conversation. And we want to thank you all so much for watching today. We hope to see you back here next Sunday for another edition of the Georgia Vote.